At this moment, we remove all our political demands, and we will stand by you and assist you in this mighty mission so that Israel will go back to winning. I assume I will pay a certain political price in the next few hours, few days. Never mind, we'll manage. You win some, you lose some. It's preferable that the Prime Minister beat me in a political battle than Haniya beat Israel.
David, I want to start with you after that. Who should be more embarrassed, the former Defense Minister Avigdor Liberman for not getting the elections that he wanted, or Bennett for really climbing down that tree?
Well, I think Lieberman took a very big gamble, ended up with nothing but his mandate in his hands, and he assumed that the ceasefire would cause a lot of people in the South especially to be very angry, and that he could take advantage of that politically by being the one who brought the elections about. That seems to have failed. I doubt that it's going to be reflected in the polls. I did want to respond to something that Tammi and the rabbi said, and to say there's a broader context here that we're kind of missing. Yes, there is a political jostling. It's the last year before scheduled elections, and every single political party is trying to get positioned. But there's also the issue of the Trump peace plan. And a lot of people that I've spoken to have said that part of the issue and the reason why Netanyahu wants to hold this coalition together is that because the timing of the plan makes it a lot more sense if Israel's not in the middle of an election campaign. So I think that's important.
Well, that's a good excuse, unless the fact that we've been waiting for that peace plan for almost a year now, and it's not coming, and unless the fact that Netanyahu himself said that there is some kind of a mysterious security issue hovering all over us. And that's kind of scary for Israelis, I have to say, because at the end of the day, I want to know that the Prime Minister, does he have a plan? Well, apparently he doesn't really have a plan except a plan regarding, well, maybe his indictments, maybe something else, but a security plan. What about a plan about Israeli everyday life, about public transportation or welfare or other things? None of these things have been even discussed, merely discussed. Not by him, not by Lieberman, not by Bennett, not by anyone. And at the end of the day, you know, we wake up in the morning, we want to know that we can live here. Can we?
Allison?
But it's a really interesting hint. I mean, it was fascinating to me that that he doesn't want elections so badly, like David said, when he knows that a peace plan is about to be put on the table. It might be some sort of a sign that he knows the peace plan that's coming is something that's going to be to his liking, because if he was worried about it, you would think if someone else was forcing elections, he would jump at the opportunity to delay the presentation of this peace plan.
Interesting. So let me bring the rabbi on this, because there is some concern, Rabbi, in the right wing here in Israel that the Trump plan may not be what they're hoping for. Do you think that Trump, maybe after losing the House in the midterms, might be looking for an international achievement that could improve his image, whether Israel likes it or not?
Well, let's remember that President Trump's core political constituency are Christian evangelicals who do not want Israel to trade land for peace. And to the extent that the plan, whose contents we don't yet know, involves trading land for peace, it could undermine some of the president's support. So I don't know how hard they're going to push on that. But let me just speak about, as far as the political situation in Israel, of course, that's so important to the citizens of Israel. But for us Americans, people across the pond who want to support Israel, get the American government to support Israel, this is all inside baseball. The bigger question is, what will Israel do to isolate Hamas? And what Israel's doing right now, it's sending big signals to the international community. On the one hand, it says that Hamas has a covenant that calls for Israel's annihilation. They're never going to stop attacking Israel. On the other hand, they're allowing Qatar to fund Hamas. I don't get it. And people here don't get it. You have to have a clear message to the international community. Is Hamas evil and they have to be stopped and starved into capitulation? Or should they be supported because there's a humanitarian crisis? Okay. No one knows what Israel's position is on this, and it's creating terrible confusion here.
David, the Prime Minister said last night that Israel shouldn't go to elections because of the dire security situation. So didn't he basically admit that the security situation under his leadership has deteriorated?
Look, I think that a lot of people have been asking me for many years, how is it that Netanyahu keeps getting elected, to borrow from that other political thing, when nobody I know likes him. The fact is that a lot of what absorbs the attention of the news and the journalists, especially abroad, with due respect to the rabbi, are the things that are most interesting and entertaining. The criminal indictment or investigations, the questions of what's going on inside of his household and so forth. But what Israelis vote on is what what affects them most personally? What are the chances? Under whose leadership are my kids more likely to get sucked into? I have 3 kids in the IDF, into an armed conflict. Under whose leadership is the economy growing the best? And and Netanyahu has built for himself a track record of relative calm and relative peace and relative prosperity during many years. I know Tammi doesn't like to hear that, but
this is not true.
It may not be true, but it may not be.
Say differently.
Well,
which numbers?
Well, for example, look at where Israel is regarding to the rest of the OECD. Countries. We are the poorest country.
When
the
Israeli citizens are the poorest Israel wasn't in the OECD.
Our gap between rich and poor, our level of education. I disagree. I think that the real problem, I think that people are tired of Netanyahu, but I think that the big problem is the lack of an alternative, either on the right or on the left. And, as long as nobody who is really convincing steps forward and looks like an alternative leader, Netanyahu will stay where he is.
Speaking of an alternative, reflected in the polls as well.
Okay, let's talk about some polls. I want to show you something that was published by Israel's news company Hadashot, speaking about basically why we're here. It says 53% support the call for early elections, considering the current political circumstances. 59% say that former Defense Minister Liberman's resignation was the right move for him, and 49% say they believe him when he says it was over disagreements with the security cabinet and wasn't out of political moves. Rabbi, what's your take on this? It seems the public didn't fall for the spin saying that Lieberman, his move was all about politics, and the public, the Israeli public, a majority, want to go to elections now. They're frustrated.
Well, Israel never wants to be stuck, and very often it feels that it becomes takua. So I don't question Lieberman's motives, to be honest, and I think that we have to stop this demonization of politicians in Israel, especially if they've proven some sort of track record. The fact is that Hamas fired 400 rockets to Israel. What is Israel's response? The fact is Israel doesn't want to see another 67 soldiers die. That is the ultimate dilemma. And unless that dilemma is solved, you're going to see wars in Gaza for the next 20 years, God forbid. It's never going to go away. So what provoked this political crisis still has yet to be resolved. Let me just say one thing about Netanyahu, however. Israelis have always been self-conscious about their international image abroad. And the one thing Netanyahu has is international cachet. He is welcomed by hundreds of millions of people in places like India and South America. And Israelis have not forgotten that, especially his very close relationship with President Trump. Now, if this peace plan is coming in a month or two, and if it does involve concessions on Israel's part, you're going to need a very strong Israeli prime minister who has a good relationship with the administration to push back on some of those concessions. Because I think Netanyahu's base is not going to stand for a Palestinian state, even a demilitarized state. Which prime minister is going to have the cachet in Washington to push back? Israelis are looking at that as well.
But I want to go back to the Hadashot poll, Allison. It shows that when asked who they would vote for if the elections were held today, Likud goes back to 30 seats. Yesh Atid, led by Yair Lapid, at 18 seats, and the Zionist Union only at 12. And of course, everybody's talking about the Benny Gantz, the former chief of staff, IDF chief of staff. What would happen if he joins the race? The Likud goes down to 26, Zionist Union up to 24, Yesh Atid drops to 14. It seems like the big story here is that Benny Gantz, he does well in the polls. And they're just polls, let's face it, they're just polls. Can he be the savior of the left? And also, I want all of you to answer, what does it mean when the left, again, needs a general to bring back its numbers?
Well, the polls love a cipher because everyone can project what they want into that politician who has not really taken a stand on any of the issues. They can take at Benny Gantz and look at Benny Gantz and imagine he's on the right, imagine he's on the left, imagine what he is. Until he defines himself, he's going to be very popular. Once he defines himself, there are going to be people who agree with him and people who don't agree with him. My kids, I was speaking to them yesterday, and they were very enthusiastic. What about Benny Gantz? They're also in the Army, ex-general. I said, well, we've been in this play before where we sort of parachuted a chief of staff, from leading the army to leading the country with Ehud Barak, and we saw that the skills that shine in leading the military do not always shine when it comes to rounding up a democracy and making it bend to your will. So as much as we need a hero, and we do need a hero right now, and I hope that Benny Gantz could fill the bill, I'm skeptical as to whether he really is as wonderful as many people believe he is.
He's a hero. That's one of the problems.
What do you need?
We need a leader, not a hero. We don't need a messiah.
Well, the left doesn't have one.
We don't need a movie star. And Netanyahu is a great speaker.
Is
no
it Yair
question.
Lapid?
But Yair Lapid is also, he's a great model.
Is it?
But anyone who has leadership, who has an agenda, a real agenda. What is Yair Lapid's agenda? Nobody knows. What is Netanyahu's agenda? Nobody knows. And that's the problem. When we are focusing about the way that they perform on TV or abroad, then we are forgetting that the real issues are still the real issues.
In America, we call it the vision thing. They need a vision.
Yeah, look, I think Netanyahu has made his agenda very, very clear over and over again. He wants quiet. Okay, he wants to let the economy go.
He wants to stay in office.
Listen,
Well, that's not an agenda.
Clearly, you haven't been listening. He wants quiet. He wants the economic growth. And he's proven himself over and over again as somebody who shows strength, talks strength, but when it comes down to it, he, unlike a lot of other leaders Israel's had, refrains from entering into the major conflict. He's been prime minister for what, a total of 9 years? Okay, okay, hang on. Okay, Ehud Barak was in for a few months, and we had the second Intifada. Ehud Olmert was in for a few months, and we had first the Lebanon war, and then the big blow up in Gaza. Netanyahu has been in office for a 9-year period, in which, with the exception of the 2014 Gaza crisis, which was a mini war,
with 74 dead.
But over that, okay, but how listen, Israelis respect and accept the relative calm and security that comes with the Netanyahu administration, and that's why they keep voting for him.
Well, in the South, not so much these days.
We'll see what happens by election.
Can I just add?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Look, from the perspective of an American Jew, I believe Israelis are now looking at American Jewry as the ones who are really imperiled. There's a big story in yesterday's New York Times that American Jews are basically disappearing. Assimilation is ravaging our ranks. Israelis see themselves, thank God, as the future of Israel. They're a flourishing nation economically, militarily. So there's confidence. It's not just Netanyahu's personality cult. And I agree that Benny Gantz or anyone else can't just be a messiah figure who they think is going to magically fix Israel's problems. It's about slow progress, and Israel sees that progress internationally, in diplomacy. But the key here, I want to bring it back, and I'm sorry to belabor the point, is that Hamas is a real problem. That's the one thing that Israelis are really focused on now. No nation can survive when rockets are falling on its citizens. And that has not been solved. And these kites have not been solved. And until there is some solution. And our Jewish values work against us because we despise the death of a single soldier. Here in America, it's tragic.
Allison?
Soldiers die in Afghanistan. We don't really focus on it. In Israel, they do. What is the solution?
Yeah.
Netanyahu must find one, or his political will be undermined.
Yeah, I mean, Netanyahu is managing the conflict. You say we need to solve the conflict. Lieberman basically walked away because he was talking like Rabbi Boteach, and he couldn't, he couldn't do anything about it. I mean, nobody wants to admit that this conflict has to be managed, and it can't be solved unless you want to.
Managing the conflict, and
my question is,
what's going to happen every day, because we have no real vision for how this thing is going to have to be solved.
Israelis have lived through the implementation of bold visions like the Oslo Accords and like other things, and a lot of people died as a result.
Well, but we understood the vision. At the end of this vision was peace. That was the idea. What is the idea now? What is it promising to us at the end of the road?